Picture this. A Hollywood titan sits at his desk late at night. He's not running lines or reading a script. He's opening a private, leather-bound journal. Under the heading, The Vicious, he starts to write. The man is Burt Lancaster, and according to Hollywood legend, he kept a secreter, detailed list of the cruelest, most manipulative, and morally bankrupt people in the business. This wasn't just a list of rivals, it was a damning indictment of an industry built on illusion. Today, we're opening that legendary book. From the explosive ego of his greatest rival, Kirk Douglas, to the dark secrets of America's boy next door, Mickey Rooney, we're about to expose the names and scandals Burt Lancaster supposedly threatened to unleash on a town that ran on secrets. This is the story Hollywood didn't want you to know. To really get why this so-called list mattered, you first have to understand the man who was supposedly writing it. Burt Stephen Lancaster was never just another pretty face. He was a force of nature. He was the Harlem street kid who literally ran off to join the circus, a man with incredible physical grace and a laugh that could be genuine or just plain cutting. This wasn't a guy who was easily impressed. By the time he hit stardom, he was already in his 30s, older and way wiser than the fresh-faced kids the studios were churning out. He didn't just want to be somebody, he wanted to do something, and he did. In 1948, when actors were basically property of the major studios, Lancaster did the unthinkable. He started his own independent production company, Hector Lancaster. This was revolutionary. It broke the studio's chokehold on talent and gave Lancaster incredible power over his own career. He wasn't just an actor for hire anymore, he was the boss. He chose his own projects, directors, and co-stars. He made movies that mattered to him, tackling tough issues like racism and political corruption long before it was cool. This independence earned him a reputation for being brilliant, ambitious, and frankly, ruthless. He was a man of principle, a vocal liberal who supported the civil rights movement, and stood up against the McCarthy-era blacklists when most of Hollywood was running for cover. But that integrity came with a famously short temper. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper, a powerhouse herself, called him terrible-tempered Burt. He was known for being brutally direct on set, a guy who didn't suffer fools and wasn't afraid to let you know it. He fired directors who didn't meet his standards and approached his work with the same grueling focus he'd learned in the circus. This was the man judging his peers. Not some jealous nobody, but one of the most powerful and respected men in town, who held everyone including himself to an impossibly high standard. So, when whispers got out that this titan of integrity and temper was keeping a personal list of Hollywood's sinners, the industry held its breath. The first name on that list would have surprised no one. It was the man who was his equal, his rival, and his other half on screen. The relationship between Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas is pure Hollywood legend. They were two sides of the same golden coin, making 7 films together where their chemistry just sizzled with competition and conflict. But off-screen, that sizzle often sparked into a loud war. Their rivalry kicked off with their very first movie together, I Walk Alone. In 1947, Lancaster was the raw, physical acrobat. Douglas was the sharp, ambitious theater kid from New York. Right from the start, they circled each other like boxers. Each one worried the other would steal the show. Their whole dynamic was a constant game of one-upmanship. This professional rivalry spilled over into their personal lives, which were often filled with sharp, cutting jokes. Lancaster loved to introduce his co-star by saying, "Kirk would be the first to admit he is a difficult person. I would be the second." Douglas wrote in his autobiography that while filming Gunfight at the OK Corral, they ruined a whole day of shooting because they couldn't stop laughing at their own tough guy personas. But under the laughs, a real resentment was brewing. Lancaster, the intellectual and activist, reportedly saw Douglas as an arrogant narcissist, a man carved from ambition and coated in cold ice. He thought Douglas was a ruthless operator who'd step on anyone to get to the top. This tension is at the heart of one of the most infamous, though possibly mythical, stories of their feud. The legend goes that at a public event in 1957, the usual teasing took a cruel turn. Lancaster, who was a tall 6'2", started making fun of Douglas's height. He joked that Douglas at 5'7", wore lifts in his shoes to look taller on screen. The joke, maybe not meant to be vicious, hit a nerve. Douglas, who was deeply insecure about his height, was humiliated. In front of everyone, his face turned bright red, and he supposedly burst into tears before storming out. Now whether that tearful exit actually happened is up for debate. It's become a piece of Hollywood folklore, but it points to a deeper truth. Their rivalry was so intense it created its own myths. Like the rumor that Lancaster demanded a height clause in their contracts or made Douglas stand in trenches to appear level on camera. These stories are probably not true, but the fact that they've lasted shows you just how much bad blood people saw between them. The conflict wasn't just about jokes, it was a clash of personalities. They were both alpha males who found it impossible to share the spotlight. Lancaster, the self-made man, looked at Douglas's relentless ambition with contempt. For Lancaster, Douglas represented a specific kind of Hollywood evil, the all-consuming ego. Though they made up and became close friends in old age with Douglas, saying poignantly after Lancaster's death, "We fought a lot, and I miss him a lot for decades." That bitter rivalry put Kirk Douglas right at the top of Burt Lancaster's alleged list. Next on Lancaster's supposed hit list was an actor who stood for a different kind of moral failure, the ultimate suck-up. That man was Tony Curtis. Their on-screen dance of death happened in the 1957 masterpiece, Sweet Smell of Success, a movie so cynical, it's still one of the darkest takes on the American media ever filmed. The movie explores the toxic relationship between the monstrously powerful Broadway gossip columnist, J.J. Hunsaker, played by Lancaster, and the slimy press agent Sidney Falco, played by Curtis. Hunsaker is a god in his world, whose column can make or break you. Falco is his groveling servant, a cookie full of arsenic, willing to do any dirty deed just to get his clients' names in print. The on-screen dynamic was a chilling picture of abuse. Lancaster's Hunsaker is cold, precise, and totally ruthless. Curtis's Falco is a bundle of nerves, scurrying in Hunsaker's shadow, desperate for a scrap of approval. It was a brave role for Curtis, who was mostly known as a pretty boy movie star. He fought for the part to prove he could act, and he nailed it, but maybe it came at a cost. The vibe on set was reportedly as toxic as the movie itself, and according to Hollywood lore, the line between fiction and reality started to get blurry, at least for Burt Lancaster. As the powerful producer of the film, he allegedly started to see Tony Curtis not as an actor playing a role, but as the real-life version of the morally empty character he was playing. Lancaster, who had clawed his way to the top, had zero respect for weakness, or for people who pandered to power, instead of grabbing it for themselves. In Sidney Falco, he saw everything he hated about Hollywood: the fawning, the desperation, the willingness to sell your soul for a little fame. It's said that Lancaster's on-screen contempt for Falco wasn't just acting. He saw in Curtis's desperate performance a reflection of a real-world hunger for fame that he found disgusting. There's no proof. Lancaster kept a physical list with Tony Curtis's name on it, but in the world of Sweet Smell of Success, in that masterful, chilling performance, he left a permanent record of his judgment. He saw Tony Curtis as Sidney Falco, the ultimate symbol of the bootlicking sycophant. We're just getting to the heart of Hollywood's secret history, and the rivalries ran deeper than anyone knew. Before we reveal the man whose off-screen life was even more chaotic than Lancaster's temper. If you're enjoying this peek behind the curtain, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's next. While actors were the main targets of Lancaster's supposed scorn, his list of grievances wasn't just for his cause. Next up was a figure just as legendary as Lancaster himself, the director John Huston. Their feud wasn't about professional jealousy, but was forged in the disastrous and ultimately tragic production of the 1960 Western, The Unforgiven. The film, produced by Lancaster's company, was meant to be a powerful statement about racism. It was about a frontier family torn apart when it's revealed their adopted daughter, played by Audrey Hepburn, is actually of Kiowa descent. It was a risky topic for the time, and the production was a mess from day one. Huston, a brilliant but notoriously difficult director, clashed with Lancaster constantly. He felt the producers wanted a more commercial film, while he wanted to make a raw statement about bigotry. The set in Durango, Mexico, became a battleground. Huston, famous for his love of adventure, was often distracted, and the production fell apart. Then, tragedy struck. In a horrifying accident, Audrey Hepburn was thrown from a horse and broke her back. Production stopped for weeks. Months later, Hepburn, still recovering, had a miscarriage, which she later blamed on the trauma from the fall. While it was no single person's fault, the accident cast a dark cloud over the film and made the bad blood between Lancaster and Huston even worse. Lancaster, the disciplined professional, saw a production spinning out of control under a director he felt was being negligent. Huston, in turn, grew to hate the movie, later saying it was the only film of his he truly disliked. The bitterness between them became legendary, leading to a story that, true or not, perfectly captures their mutual hatred. As the tale goes, their feud followed them to a celebrity golf tournament. Huston, looking for a creative way to get back at the intensely competitive Lancaster, hired a small plane. Just as Lancaster was lining up a crucial putt, the plane flew over and dropped hundreds of golf balls on the green. Like the other stories, this anecdote might be more myth than fact, but it shows you just how spectacularly they fell out. For Lancaster, John Huston represented a different kind of Hollywood corruption, not of morals, but of the craft itself. In Lancaster's eyes, Huston was a brilliant artist who had let his ego and carelessness derail a project and contribute to a tragedy. In Lancaster's alleged Book of Judgments, Huston wasn't just a difficult director, he was a symbol of wasted potential and a reckless abuse of power. Burt Lancaster's personal crusade, if you believe the stories, was a war on hypocrisy. He built his career on fierce independence, breaking free from the studio system. That's why the next name rumored to be on his list stood for everything he fought against. A man whose power allegedly came not just from talent, but from dark connections. That man was Frank Sinatra. By the 50s and 60s, Sinatra was more than a star. He was an institution, the chairman of the board. He'd pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in history, winning an Oscar for From Here to Eternity, the same film that made Lancaster a top leading man. Sinatra had this image of tough, romantic, cool. He was the undisputed king of the Rat Pack, the definition of Vegas swagger. But behind the OL Blue Eyes charm, there was a darker side to the legend. For decades, rumors and FBI files linked Sinatra to major figures in organized crime. While how deep these ties went is still debated, his friendships with mobsters were an open secret in Hollywood. For a guy like Burt Lancaster, this was the ultimate sin. Lancaster was a die-hard political activist who cared deeply about civil rights. His power was self-made. Sinatra, on the other hand, was seen by many as a product of an older, compromised system. There were always whispers, never proven, that his career got a little help at key moments from his underworld connections. Marlon Brando, who famously clashed with Sinatra, believed for the rest of his life that Sinatra had sent mob goons to threaten him. While we don't know what Lancaster specifically thought about Sinatra's alleged mob ties, it's not hard to guess. To Lancaster, a man who prized integrity, Sinatra's well-known association with criminals would have been repulsive. It represented a deep corruption, a reliance on a shadow power that operated outside the law. It was the exact opposite of the independent career Lancaster had built for himself. In Lancaster's world, a man's character was everything. Sinatra's tough guy persona seemed tied to these dark rumors. He wasn't just playing a role. He was living a life that seemed to celebrate a kind of glamorous lawlessness. For Burt Lancaster, the self-appointed moral judge of his generation, this wasn't just a flaw. It was a betrayal, earning Frank Sinatra a prominent spot in his alleged Chronicle of the Damned. For the final, and maybe most surprising name, on Burt Lancaster's supposed list, we move from big egos and shady connections, to a different kind of tragedy, a cautionary tale of talent wasted and a life destroyed by chaos. This was a man who, for a while, was the biggest movie star in the world, but behind the scenes, his life was a train wreck of scandal, abuse, and self-destruction. That man was Mickey Rooney. On the surface, Lancaster and Rooney were polar opposites. Lancaster was the disciplined craftsman. Rooney, a child star with huge natural talent, was known for a chaotic personal life and being disruptive on set. While Lancaster was building an empire, Rooney was blowing a fortune. He was a notorious gambler who'd take calls from his bookie on set, and his 8 marriages were constant tabloid drama. To Lancaster, a film set was a machine, and everyone had a job to do. Rooney, by many accounts, treated it like his personal playground. Lancaster, the ultimate professional, would have found this lack of discipline insulting. It was an insult to the craft he loved. But Lancaster's reported contempt for Rooney likely went deeper than that. It was a moral judgment on a life lived with no self-control. Rooney's story was a list of Hollywood horrors. His marriage to Ava Gardner ended in less than a year amid claims of cheating. His 5th wife was tragically murdered by her lover in their home. He declared bankruptcy multiple times, dying with just $18,000 to his name after earning millions. He was addicted to pills, a habit the studios themselves helped create to keep him working nonstop as a kid. And in the most heartbreaking chapter, Rooney testified before Congress in his final years, revealing he was a victim of elder abuse by his own stepson. Rooney's life was the dark side of the American dream. It was a product of the Hollywood machine, built up and then thrown away. He represented the ultimate hypocrisy of the Golden Age, the happy, all-American image that hid a reality of addiction, exploitation, and pain. For Burt Lancaster, the man of principle and control, Rooney was the ultimate failure. He wasn't just an undisciplined actor. He was a symbol of the industry's most destructive side. In Lancaster's alleged secret book, Mickey Rooney was the final, tragic exhibit of a Hollywood that eats its own children. So, did this leather-bound book of Hollywood's sinners actually exist? Probably not. In the end, the legend of Burt Lancaster's secret list lives on because of the truth it represents. The list was a metaphor. It was the physical version of a judgment he passed on his industry every single day in his work, his activism, and his famous temper. Lancaster was a man of contradictions, a street kid who became a legend, a brute with a sharp intellect, a ruthless producer who fought for social justice. He saw the Golden Age for what it was, a beautiful illusion hiding a world of bitter rivalries, deep insecurities, and major moral compromises. From Kirk Douglas's ego to Tony Curtis's pandering, from John Huston's carelessness to the hypocrisy around Frank Sinatra and the tragedy of Mickey Rooney, Lancaster saw the sins of his peers with brutal clarity. He made himself Hollywood's conscience, the unwilling writer of the dark stories lurking just behind the silver screen. His list, real or imagined, is a timeless reminder that the stories behind the camera are often far more dramatic than anything that makes it to the screen. Final CTA, what do you think of the names on Burt Lancaster's alleged list? Was he a righteous judge or just a bitter old man? Who do you think was the most evil figure of Hollywood's golden age? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to keep uncovering more of Hollywood's hidden stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.